Before I introduce myself, as is our practice at the North American Indian Center of Boston, we want to take this time to recognize the land on which we stand, the land which holds us, the land which sustains us. I want to acknowledge this, Boston, what we call Boston today as the traditional indigenous territory of the Massachusetts nation, who continue to this day, through their lineal descendants, the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapaug. And in doing this, we are positioning ourselves, all of ourselves, as guests of our host tribe. And I want you all to hold in your minds and in your hearts what it means to be a good guest. Think about going to your grandmother's house. Think about what it means to be a good guest in a space that holds and protects and sustains you. What are the promises that you are going to make in your hearts for this host tribe? Will you join with NAICOB in supporting every effort by our host tribe to make sure of the rematriation of the land and natural resources back to the original peoples? Is that something that you promise? Shimmy, did they promise? I don't think. Shimmy doesn't think y'all promise loud enough. Promise! Promise! One more time, one more time.
Your promise!
My name is Jean-Luc Perrite. I'm originally from New Orleans. I'm a member of the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana. And here in Boston, I serve as the president of the board of directors at the North American Indian Center of Boston. And like many of you, I haven't gotten a lot of sleep since last night. Like many of you, my eyes are tired, my body is tired, my mind is tired by this constant tirades and this back and forth, and the realization that no matter what happens this week, the good guys did not win. Many of us are asking ourselves, when are we going to return back to normal? Our international partners, European nations, nations all over, the United Nations are looking to America right now in this mythology of American exceptionalism to understand, when are we going to return back to normal? And in this time of unsurety, on top of a time of unsurety of the pandemic, all I have to ask is, how much time do you have to wait? Hours, days, weeks, months, years? Why don't you ask the Taino and the Arawak, whose land was invaded in 1492, and then in 1493, it was the Roman Catholic Church that enacted the doctrine of discovery, that laid out a path for European nations, Christian European nations, to pillage, to extract, to take from black and indigenous peoples worldwide. Why don't we ask the men and women who were trafficked from Angola to these shores in 1619 to Jamestown, to the traditional territory of the Powhatan, 2 years after the death of the native woman who we now commonly know as Pocahontas? Why don't we ask these people? Why don't we ask the Wampanoag and all the tribes in their confederacy, who next year will observe the 400th anniversary of the Treaty of Massasoit, which started government-to-government relationships between indigenous nations and the peoples that would become the United States of America, who lived in a so-called 50-year period of peace until wars of resistance were fought on this land, most especially King Philip's War 345 years ago, in which all American Indians in the proximity of Boston were interned. They were rounded up and left to die on the Boston Harbor Islands, where their graves are today. Why don't we ask the Lakota, the men, the women, the children who were murdered by the American military under President Benjamin Harrison at the massacre of Wounded Knee? And then it was that same president who led a marketing campaign in which he established the national observance of Christopher Columbus Day, a day in which every public school had an American flag installed, and children for the first time recited a poem which was conceived right there on Columbus Avenue, the Pledge of Allegiance. Why don't we ask all of our ancestors, our elders, who fought for over 100 years just to participate in this democratic experiment, voting rights which were not granted to our people until the 70s? And why don't we ask our children who are going to public schools in which they are learning about all this colonialism at 3rd or 4th grade levels, just when they are about to learn how to point to countries on a map, they are also expected to trace with those same fingers the ships that came from Europe to here to rob and pillage their own ancestors. And when you get into high school in these public schools in Massachusetts, they start off with the American Civil War, skipping 150 years of genocide and slave trade. Indigenous peoples have been waiting for things to return to normal for over 500 years. Black and indigenous peoples have been waiting for things to return to normal for over 500 years. And so tonight, we are joining with the Freedom Fighters Coalition to demand that the children that are learning about colonialism at 3rd or 4th grade, those same children will go to school and learn that the impacts of climate change are directly tied to the legacy of white supremacy. They need to learn that science. We are here to demand that there is no environmental justice without Black and Indigenous peoples. And we are here to demand that Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Ed Markey, everybody that's an agent of this United States government, they understand what it is to be a good guest and uphold the promises that this country has made with the original peoples. When I say the people united, you say we'll never be defeated. The people united
will never be defeated.
The people united
Will never be defeated.
The people united
Will never be defeated.
Touch. Thank you.
Gina, and I'm a staff member at the North American Indian Center in Boston. And I have 2 asks before I begin my speech today. 1, y'all all have PayPal, right? Go to info@NAICOB.org and donate. Donate to the people who are actually here before you. Second thing, look up the Massachusetts Indigenous Legislative Agenda. Y'all heard?
Yeah.
Y'all heard?
Yeah.
Thanks. So we're here today for something other than the election. We're here today for something other than the cishet patriarchy. Envisioning a future where we all thrive instead of merely surviving is an act of science fiction. The official number of Indigenous peoples in Massachusetts for voting purposes is 192. In the land of the Massachusetts, the Nipmuc, the Mashpee Wampanoag, the Aquino Wampanoag of Gayhead, the Pequot, the Pecumtuck. They say there is only 192 Indigenous peoples. I say different. I say that we have been here, that we are here, and that we will be here. My grandmother has an 8th grade education due to residential boarding schools, and my mom has her master's. The dream of her child getting farther ahead than the opportunity she was given is an act of science fiction, an imagined future of major social change. Together we are here for an imagined future of social change that doesn't include white men in their 70s. It doesn't include praying by the rules of the settler-colonial, capitalistic, white supremac system. Instead, we are breaking them. Boston has too much money and too little care for her citizens. Look at where the fuck we're standing. We, not the city council, have created free food fridges around the city, supporting those who are experiencing food insecurity. We, not the mayor, are demanding an end to unjust evictions during a pandemic. We, not the Senate, are demanding that the racist mascots in schools across the Commonwealth be changed. So no matter what, we have been here, we are here, and we will continue to be here. Knock him out.